I have a chance to talk to Professor Wang Mingming, who I've known for 3 or 4 years now. How would you like me to call you?
Wang Mingming.
Wang Mingming, okay. So when and where were you born?
I was born in this city, the city of Quanzhou, in March 1962. Yeah.
1962.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you're 46, is that?
I'm 46, more than that, a few months more.
Okay. Tell me something about your family, as far back as you like. As an anthropologist, you're probably interested in your ancestors.
Right, maybe not that far, but my father was kind of, he started in this city as an ordinary person, a worker.
What kind of work?
He began when he was very young in this city as somebody a young boy who made ice cream for the movie, the cinemas, and then the liberation in 1949 took place, and he had this opportunity to become what we call the border soldier, border defending soldier, one of those. But my grandmother was really angry at that because he was her only son. So she took him back from the army. And so my father,
Which border was this?
This is the coastal line.
The coastal border.
Yeah. So my father moved back to the city. And since then, he has worked in the government, right? As somebody like a civil servant. Then my mother went to a nurse school in about 70 miles from here, kind of Republican area in that period. She went, and then she came to this city to work in the first hospital. So they met each other, and I'm kind of product of their love anyway. And I don't know how far I should trace back. Yeah?
Yes, trace back.
But my surname is Wang. Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, I look quite awkward to the Han Chinese because my nose is slightly bigger, and maybe my eyes are slightly deeper than ordinary Chinese. So supposedly I'm kind of mixture, and I have this impression that my mother's mother, her eyes look quite different from the Chinese. They are kind of brown eyes instead of dark eyes. And people here said that she is Persian.
Persian?
Yeah, she's kind of descendant of Persian person.
So there was a huge Persian presence here, wasn't there?
There was a huge Persian community in this area a long time ago, about in the Yuan dynasty in the 13th century. The Persian were either merchants or soldiers, hired soldiers who employed by the Mongols to control this area on behalf of them, right? Because this area, the main inhabitants were the Han. And maybe I'm a mixture of that kind, but my surname is kind of different story. Yeah? Our genealogy says that our first ancestor was one of the 3 brothers who conquered Fujian in the so-called 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms period. When the 3 brothers from Henan, they were all in the same family. Yeah, they were Wang, like a king, and they established this Min state, separated from the other states when China was divided. Yeah, I don't know whether this genealogical story is correct, but people are proud that we are the descendant of this big regional state. But I don't know. This is different from the unified China perspective. Yeah. So the longer perspective of our family history is kind of also quite complicated. Yeah. And in my own experience, I'm just a child, a son of my mother and my father, who continue to work for this government. Yeah. This is what I can say.
On the Persian matter, was this ever discussed in your family? And was there any acknowledgement that maybe there was a Persian element?
No. My grandmother, my mother's mother, right? She often complained that her fellow villagers gave her a nickname like cat's eye. Yeah, she was called a cat's eye, but her village was not recognized by the government as a Hui Muslim community, so she never thought of herself as a Hui or Persian. Yeah. So we never, we have never been interested in this ethnic matter of our family, but I do feel that I look quite awkward to other fellow Chinese people. Yeah.
What did your mother ever talk about?
No, she's just a kind of post-revolutionary civil servant, a chief nurse in a hospital. So grateful to the new Chinese government. Yeah. And
did you have brothers or sisters?
I have two sisters, one living here, another living in the Philippines. Quite typical of people in this area, a family living, members of just one family living in different places or countries even.
Because this is a very famous area for migration.
Yes, emigration, yeah.
Why is that? Why? Because it's coastal and trading and rather poor and...
For my undergraduate degree, I wrote an article about this. Why this huge emigration? Why don't they just come back? I had this question. Yeah, they went out and do business and come back to China to just like treat here as their home. But they seem not. I did some calculation of demography. There was this quite huge decline of population in this area during the Ming and the Qing, like much fewer people here than before, right? So people must have been killed or just moved out, and according to a lot of local historical studies, they really moved out. Why did they move out? And this is the question that I have been trying to answer. I think that the imperial state didn't allow enough space for their commerce, which was so critical to their livelihood, because agriculture here was not so, not so possible. All the field was not enough, and then the sea. There's some saying like this. The Fujianese people treat the sea as the field, right? And so this commerce was not really like commerce. It's something about livelihood. And because the empire didn't have this, late imperial empire didn't have this policy of openness. So local people just didn't want to. They dare not come back. So long as they come back, they would have had difficulties of going out again. And there seemed no point for them to stay forever. Here agriculture is so difficult. Yeah. And population was so large because of all the earlier migrations from North China to this place, to this coastal area. Especially when North China was so chaotic, according to our histories. Yeah, when North China had the chaos
Was this during the Min?
No certain Luan.
When they, from the Mongols and the Manchus coming in?
Even earlier on, like in the Jin dynasty, the Yongjia 之乱, the chaos of Yongjia period, Yongjia reign, right? A lot of people moved here. And then the mid-Tang chaos of Anshi 之乱, those two chaos brought here a lot of population. But you know, my dissertation says, my under BA dissertation tried to argue that there was this heavy pressure on the land, so that pressed people to go out, and they could still come back. But here, you know, by the Ming dynasty, there was this policy of forbidding maritime trade. This is
your theory.
My theory, but I hope it explains certain part of my identity or my family, you know, family structure, if you like.
When you mention it, might explain a little of your identity and family structure. Do you see your work and your identity as mixed together? In other words, your work helps you to understand your own position and history.
I think my experience in this city has helped me think a lot about my studies, and inspired me a lot. But this came even clearly when I had more experience abroad, especially in England, studying anthropology. Because you know, this is a city of mixtures, mixtures. If we want to say, you also emphasize that. When I went to London, I thought, you know, finally I realized that social anthropology in Britain or in Europe or in America, people just emphasize categories of things and peoples without paying too much attention to mixtures of things and peoples. And the mixtures of things and peoples in this place, you know, is something that is quite enlightening for, in my belief, for any anthropologist in the world. And so I'm especially interested in this topic. You know, how do we deal with mixtures? Of course, the structural anthropology has taught us a lot about, you know, mixtures in kinship, you know, to look at the mixtures of communities and groups, the kind of kinship work. But I don't think that's enough. You know, there are some historical mixture, you know, some historical backgrounds of the mixtures, and there's some limit of them. The limits, you know, will influence people and induce certain reactions to the mixtures. So they can produce kind of nativist perspective or a kind of Puritan perspective in local society as reaction to mixtures. I'm hoping to think this out. I have written quite a lot, very sadly not in English, but mostly in Chinese, about how we deal with mixtures.
Thank you. Let's get back to your life. At what age did you first go to school?
I went to school at 7, to a primary school, not far from here, about kind of not more than 1 mile, which was called the East is Red School. And you know the phrase.
Yes.
Referred to Mao Zedong. And about 2 years after that, Cultural Revolution became quite violent. In the beginning, it was less so, just demonstrations, just slogans. So the school was kind of not working effectively, even though the teachers tried really hard to maintain the order. Some older students in my school just, they could arrest the teachers and struggle against them in front of a big mass of us. And we were encouraged to throw stones on the teachers, towards them.
Did you do that?
To humiliate them.
Did you do that?
Yes, I remember that during one struggle meeting, I did throw one little piece of brick on the teachers. Yeah, but later I found that my older brothers in the schools, older students, were those naughty boys. The naughty boys, they didn't do well, so they hated these teachers. And our Chairman Mao seemed to provide a certain reason for them to get so angry at the teachers. It's about, I went to the school in 1969. Yeah, but before that, in 1966, I went to the kindergarten. Also nearby, also very near, close to here. Right? When I was 1966, I was 4. I was quite big as a kindergarten student, but there was this big tension among the classmates, and my sister was kind of in another. My older sister was in another class. I was kind of feeling so lonely because everything was going somewhere, without order. Right? The second day, I just entered the kindergarten the first day with certain fear of strangeness. Yeah, I was not familiar with. I always live at home. I remember that the second day, a big boy in my class who was already 10. He studied in my class, like
10
years old, very big. I was 4, right? I was normal.
In the kindergarten.
Right. He was kind of full, but he was very big. The next day he was offered a red flag. And he held this red flag. And our teachers, we call them RE, the Andes, just organized us into teams. And we were led by this stupid boy, the big stupid boy, into the street, and we demonstrated against Mao Zedong's personal enemy, Liu Shaoqi, the president of PRC state. Yeah. And this is my vivid memory of the beginning of my school. Yeah. And then I continued to receive such education until the university. In the formal school education, I have received this kind of revolutionary education. Unfortunately, in our middle school, later I went to middle school, we had a lady teacher, musician teacher from Beijing. She was sent down in early 1970s to the mountainous area of Fujian, because in Beijing, as a student, music student, she accused, when she was drunk, she said something really bad about the wife of Mao Zedong. And so she was sent down to Fujian, and then in the mountainous areas, she performed what we call performance. Her political and productive performance was so good, so the government moved her to our school, our middle school, and as a very excellent music teacher, she attracted a lot of good students. So I joined her team, and I became a violin learner. I learned to play violin with her in quite a half secret way. We had to be trained in Western style, right? Not in Chinese Erhu style, but the really Western style. But the scriptures were not available. Yeah.
When you say scriptures, you mean
the musical scripts?
Yeah.
The scripts,
Yeah.
they
The
didn't
scores.
sell. They didn't sell. We had to copy, And this is a big influence on me. There were in that period certain people with, I believe, with great conscience and with great ability to survive and leave some imprints, good imprints on us. I'm quite grateful to that specific music teacher who helped me to have my own opinion about the school, because ordinarily you have the school. The teachers were all good, very kind teachers, but the institution was kind of awful. Yeah.
Did you continue to play musical instruments, or?
I continued until when I was a graduate student in Xiamen University. Then I stopped. I went to London. I went to London without my violin, because I thought, all these British people must be extremely good at this. I was nothing special. So I stopped, and I was very busy trying to read more Western books during my university years. I spent so much time. I began as an archaeologist, but later I changed to anthropology. I needed to study a lot. Yeah.
So you didn't have time for music.
I didn't have time.
But do you listen to much music now? Does it mean a lot to you?
In Beijing, quite a lot. But I'm quite a casual and informal person, so I don't usually bring some music here.
Is there any special music that you like above the rest? I mean, is it Western music or Chinese music or classical or jazz?
I'm sorry to say that I rarely listen to Chinese music, except those Chinese music which sound more Western. And this is quite stupid of me to have this prejudice. But after having studied with my music teacher in the middle school, I got this prejudice. I had this Western Occidentalism. And I thought that Western music was kind of perfect, like symphony, good, and that's good. But the Chinese music was so thin and slow, without any excitement. Yeah. I still have this unconscious habit of listening to Western music more than the Chinese music.
And are there any composers of Western music who you particularly like? Or periods?
I think in China, my teacher's generation, they all loved Beethoven and Tchaikovsky. And so we were not advised much to listen to much British or French composers. We had a lot of maybe Finnish more than European. Those were the kind of big, more
Sibelius.
Oh yes, those big musicians. So if you ask me, I'm not an independent decision maker. I was educated by my teacher who loved that type of music.
Going back to your school, were you inside yourself? It's very puzzling to outsiders to imagine living through the Cultural Revolution and waving the little red book and throwing stones at your teachers and so on. Did you ever question any of this inside yourself, or did you think, well, this is just... In other words, was it fear and a crowd mentality, or was it genuine, spontaneous feeling that Mao was right and communism was right?
This complex of feelings. Sometimes, even now, I think Mao was partly correct, because the boys and girls, young children had more time to play. Nowadays, all of the children are kind of fixed in the schools, everyday study, just degrees, grades and grades. Something he was kind of right. But that's, you know, his ideas, you know, I find that his ideas totally wrong near the end of Cultural Revolution. Yeah. Because there were so many stories about Deng Xiaoping. Deng Xiaoping, his successor. How great Deng Xiaoping was among the ordinary people, like legends. And so I had to, when I was already 14, right? I had to think which one was correct. And I had this big argument with my father, who was quite senior cadre, party secretary of a state-owned factory, sugar factory. I said to him that maybe capitalism was correct. Yeah. It's in 1976, and he was really angry at me. You know, how can you betray? You know, how can you say socialism is bad? Yeah. So there's this second element in the complex of feelings. Yeah. People try to have better life, try to avoid suffering. Yeah. And that made sense, you know, sound quite sensible to me. Those legends of better life to be brought by Deng Xiaoping, by capitalism, was something quite good. Right? This is kind of second element. And the third was that certain rituals of the school and the country in general turned out to be quite funny and ironic in the end. Right? The Cultural Revolution was something like festivals. So on the one hand, it was enjoyable, you know. Students just can enjoy. Mao Zedong says, reading too many books, it's useless to read books, he said. And he, you know, he prohibited us from studying English, right? So English was so difficult that we couldn't say Mandarin, yeah? We Hokkien speakers just spoke Hokkien. And you know, the schools tried to teach us English. So we were quite grateful to him. It's kind of festive, quite festive. And every day you have certain ritual activities, going to the street to shout, down with this and down with that. It's kind of liberation. But gradually, these rituals became quite funny, right? The teachers were so keen to, not keen, but they needed at least to organize us into something official, yeah, into teams, in the parades. But they themselves, they were very shy. They ashamed of wearing this red tie. They should wear, but they try to say, you should wear the red tie. But I think they should do the same. But they were always secretively taking the ties off. And then the Mandarin, they try to teach us Mandarin, the precise way of pronunciation. But their Mandarin was so awful. And once in the Mao's funeral, my principal, the principal of my middle school, was kind of chairing this big school funeral for Mao, and his Mandarin was so funny, so I laughed. I was so heavily criticized by my teachers. It's so funny, this teacher, and I had to think that this is crazy. Yeah. So you have all these images of the 10 years of Cultural Revolution. I still think that this is kind of very marvelous example for anthropologists. But for us, it's more complicated. Yeah, we have something positive about it, something negative about it. Again, it's some sort of mixture.
Mm.
And I cannot reject those who in the West call our generation a generation of ignorance. Ignorance.
Mm.
We haven't paid sufficient attention to our history. We are children of revolution. Yeah. And I think we are responsible for a lot of disasters in this country. Yeah. We are so ignorant of history, not only of Chinese history, but world history, because knowledge, when I was small, was called reactionary. Knowledge was nothing good when I was growing up. Right?
Mm.
Nowadays, knowledge is everything.
Mm.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm a little bit. I'm very disorganized. Sorry. Right.
Not at all.
Right.
Fascinating. Since we've been talking about Chairman Mao, more generally, not just as a school child, but looking back on the Mao period and Mao's revolution, how would you assess it? Do you think it was a disaster for China? Do you think on the one hand there were good things, on the other hand, or how would you assess the experiment looking back now?
Basically, I think it's a disaster, but it's kind of unacceptable. This is not correct. I say something wrong anyway. I find it a disaster. This is not good to say here in this country. Right?
Yes.
But I have this more sensible explanation of the disaster. I don't think Mao is responsible for everything. Right? Not either is the Communist Party. There is a long-term history that explains the disaster, maybe beginning in the mid-Qing dynasty, when the relationships between cultures, economies, and nations in this world became quite different from before. This integration, more contacts, and more contacts but fewer consensus among different cultures was the main driving force of all later violent interactions, which contributed to the formation of Chinese modernism. Maybe in the mid-19th century already, but then the Chinese modernism was quite okay to me now, right? Because there was this more continuous approach instead of discontinuous approach. However, by 1895, Chinese thinking radically changed. Why? Because of China's defeat in the Sino-Japanese War. You can see the subtle difference. We were defeated by you, the Europeans, in kind of early 19th century, mid-19th century, and we seem not to care too much about that, because why? You were different races. But the Japanese, they were our students. How could they, just defeat us? A lot of intellectuals just turn their attention to Japan. And then they find that Japan was successful because it absorbed all European culture. So we had to do the same, right? And this has changed the Chinese mind. That's already by the beginning, the dawn of the 20th century. So the 20th century has always this pursuit of modernity in a very radical way. And Mao, I think, is simply, if we want to assess him and his revolution, simply something in that continuum. Yeah. But he is quite special. He's different also from other modernists in China. Yeah. His difference is that he's different from either Marx or Lenin. Yeah. Neither Marx or Lenin or trusting the farmers, the peasants. But Mao had this traditional Chinese tactic of, he had this great knowledge of strategies, traditional wisdom, right? And to win, to win, he thought one had to trust the peasants, and there were some people like the poor workers, right? So he stirred up this great revolution of the peasantry, if you like, and that's very different from other branches of thought in Chinese modernism. And for example, Sun Yat-sen was a kind of more combining, kind of synthesizing both Marxism and sometimes other social theories. And Chiang Kai-shek was preferring to gain support from the national capital, right? National capitalists. As Mao Zedong and Fei Xiaotong, our great colleague, he paid placed a lot of emphasis on gentry class. Yeah. He said, in order to get the Chinese modernity, good modernity, one has to rely on the local elite, the gentry who knew how to write. But Mao was totally different. So you can say that this Cultural Revolution, if it's a disaster of one choice, one option, which was successful. Yeah. And the others were not, because it's an option derived from the consideration of majority. Yeah. And this is what I'm thinking. Why he made this, what we call we even call it the correct option in social science, because social science also emphasizes majority. I'm thinking whether it's the mistake of social science. I don't know, but this is what I think.
What about the Great Leap Forward?
That was again, it's kind of similar to what I say about the Cultural Revolution. His anxious desire to achieve this UN statistical standard level of livelihood was a very important part of the Great Leap Forward, because UN published this, what is the good life, right, for a nation. So he followed that, and he thought the interesting thing is that he always taught his followers to trust the masses, but he was very heroic, right? He thought his leadership could make China achieve this UN, goal of development. So his first slogan was to catch up with Britain. I think this part of the history of Great Leap Forward is extremely important, but it has been neglected by, existing studies. Yeah. One has to know that he was trying to modernize. Yeah. And we only talk about Deng Xiaoping as modernizer. I think that's a long history of modernism that what happened.
Right, well, let's come back to your life. Were there any other subjects at school that apart from music, which you really enjoyed and were beginning to get involved in?
I was kind of very quiet, and like now I'm kind of quite wild. I was always listening to the teachers, and they taught me what to do. I just did what they told me to do. I was quite interested. I'm not interested, but I was kind of that kind of boring boy, right? Not quite interested. And of course, I enjoy all the games. Yeah, enjoy all the boys' games.
Are you good at games?
It's quite good. Not good or bad. It's not not important. Just enjoy playing with others. Some local games. Yeah. I was quite good in all classes except sports. Yeah. I hated it because you had to line up and do something together.
But I thought you said you quite liked games.
Those games were not classified as sports.
Oh, I see.
In my mind, the games are different. They are arts, right?
What were the games? What sort of games?
Like gimbal, yeah. Playing this packing.
With
packing.
Cards.
The,
Cards.
The wrapper of cigarettes. This is a great game during that time. The boys collect different types of
I see.
Things, and then they were treated like a token, money, but symbolic money only, yeah. And they were trying to accumulate, and there were so diverse games about it anyway.
So those are the games you mean, but you don't mean sports. You don't mean rugger and.
I don't mean that. Maybe I use a different category.
Yeah. Well.
Right.
Now I understand it.
Right.
Were you doing any science by this time or not at school?
I was a quiet and kind of humble student. So I was selected by the secondary school into a very elite class of science. If I had gone on and refused to study music, then I would be in the Chinese University of Science and Technology. I was kind of #1 in the class. I was very good at the mathematics, but very bad at the chemistry. So I quite like mathematics because the teachers of mathematics were always those eccentric guys, very extremely kind of funny, comic. Their classes are so interesting. They just treated this abstract, formulas as certain games, and they always behave in a very different way from other teachers. They had their style. I love those teachers, and they have this total freedom. When they speak about the formulas, they just forget anything, right? They are marvelous. Yeah, I was so interested in mathematics.
At the end of your school, your school was in this city, was it?
Yes, also nearby.
Yeah. Did you apply to go to several universities or just?
I spent 3 years trying to go to a music academy. Or a department of music without success, right? Because maybe my standard was not not good enough, and you know there's this transitional period in history when China began to reopen the university to everybody, not just to the good workers. The intellectuals were liberated again. They were no longer criticized. And they had a lot of children and relatives to come into the music academies. So
what date is this?
It's about between 1978 and 81.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Deng Xiaoping.
Yeah, the reform. Yeah. Yeah. Began with certain in the fields of arts. They were more kind of compensation for the intellectuals, more freedom for them to choose which one you want, right? And because my father was kind of founder of a lot of factories in this city, right? So he didn't know this music people. So I didn't have this backdoorism. Backdoor, you know, that term is quite popular at the time. And I was not really a talent, right? So, without success. And then I was in 1981. I was feeling fed up with all these failures of trying to go to music academy. So I said I should try another thing. So I took the national exam in the humanities, and so in that year I was quite successful because you have this standard.
Yeah.
Which grade? And I went to archaeology in Xiamen University, in 1981.
Did you enjoy that?
Yes, I enjoy archaeology very much. My father wanted me to study management studies, and I refused. I went to archaeology because why? Archaeology, to do archaeology for me was to travel, to go to a remote site, right, and to dig up something. Yeah, and it's quite rich. Even now, archaeology, Chinese archaeology is very good. It has a lot of content, unlike social science, is kind of very empty. I was very interested in, how to just divide, to examine the items and give them some dates. Right? It's very technical thing. Yeah.
Was this? There's obviously been an enormously exciting and rich period in Chinese archaeology since then, particularly the discoveries at Shan and at Chengdu and elsewhere. Did it feel that you were living in a very exciting time with the terracotta warriors and so on?
Right. I didn't feel much. I just thought that I need so much study. Because in the bookstores, in the universities, there were so many books, new and old. And I was so ignorant, I was taught not to study, just study the textbook. It was, more than enough. Yeah. So I tried very hard to read more and more and more, and the books were so exciting. Yeah. They had new ideas. Even the European novels, I don't know much, but you had the opportunity to see them before they were forbidden, right? And that kind of blossom of 100 flowers was an exciting thing. I don't know whether Chinese archaeology discovered more, because actually there's no difference. Even under Mao, thanks to this great scholar, Guo Mo, he was an archaeologist, but Mao Zedong loved him. Right? So he had this opportunity to organize archaeology, and had a lot of discoveries even during the Cultural Revolution. And I think, in my impression, the only journal that continued to publish really academic articles was Archaeology. Yeah, Chinese Archaeology journal. But the journal always had this, in the front page, Mao's quotation. But behind you see something else, right? So in archaeology it's more difficult, but difficult to say that the post-reform period made a lot of discoveries. No, not that. But the general environment of reading and learning science was very exciting to everyone. Yeah.
Were there any particular archaeologists who you admired and influenced you, either at Xiamen or elsewhere in China or the world?
Right. I was influenced by those authors who I didn't have chance to meet. Yeah. For instance, Su Bingqi, the Beijing University archaeologist was really, really good. Until now, very good, interesting. So I love reading his. And Zhou Hen, also Beijing University professor of archaeology, he was very good at the bronze things. Yeah. And I was later year, kind of more advanced year, I had this chance to meet with Professor Tong En Zheng of Sichuan University. He moved to Michigan Museum in the 1980s, right? And K.C. Zhang, Zhang Guangzhi, and Yang Wenming, those great archaeologists. And I find them very exciting, their writings and their persons very interesting. But I had to study, I had to finish my degree. Yeah. So I followed this archaeologist, Zhuang Weiji. He's died long ago, right? Some years ago. He was the discoverer of the Song boat in Quanzhou port. I studied with him in the final year of my college, and he taught me a lot about Quanzhou, archaeology. I wrote this demography and archaeology article under his instruction. So I read a lot of his books, yeah, and became quite interested in the history of this city.
Which you went on to
right.
work on later.
Right.
Yeah. So you passed your final examinations,
Right.
and then what did you decide to do?
In the third year of my university, our section had been included by Anthropology department, which was newly established in 1983. And because the section of archaeology was attached to Department of History before 1983, so I had been in the Anthropology department, and then I took the, later, 1 year later after graduation, I took the graduate and postgraduate exam, and I got, quite high grade. I became a student of anthropology. But that kind of anthropology was still totally different from what I'm doing now. It was called ethnohistory, the study of ethnic groups in ancient times in South China. My teacher was Chen Guoqiang, also the founder of Chinese Anthropological Society. He founded in 1981. He studied with Professor Lin Huixiang, who was in Academia Sinica before the liberation. He studied anthropology in the Philippines. Yeah, it's very strange, but he was really kind of #1 advocate of anthropology in China. Same generation as Professor Fei. But my teacher, Chen Guoqiang, studied with him. So I studied with Chen Guoqiang. And as a postgraduate student, I had the opportunity to join the movement of promoting anthropology in China. I began to do some translation with, not very smooth language, but, that was quite exciting to me. Just trying to do some work anyway. Yeah.
What were you translating?
I did some very basic, like textbook. It's my teacher's assignment. You do this textbook, something. And then I had a lot of opportunity to read more and more English books.
Had you learnt English at school? Or,
actually, I really began to learn English in 1981. It's a necessary exam if I wanted to go to university.
Mm.
So I had to learn it.
Mm.
And then in a university, yes, I spent quite a lot of time learning it
Mm.
without being able to speak,
Mm.
just to read
Mm.
and write the sentences.
Mm. Mm. And then that's when you started to translate.
I started to
Mm.
translate, yeah.
Mm.
Mm.
So that was for 1 year after university.
After university, you mean master's degree?
Yes.
That's for, normally in China it's a Soviet system. It's an MPhil system of Soviet Union. It was kind of 3 years.
3 years.
But I finished 2 years, then I went to London in 1987.
Why did you decide to go to London?
There was this opportunity to go. Because our university received a document from the Ministry of Education saying that your university can select the 3 students to go with the Sino-British Friendship Scholarship to anywhere in Britain, right? So I took the exam and I was selected as one of the 3. Yeah, so I went with that scholarship.
Could you choose which university you would go to?
I would any university and any subject of study, I could choose. I could choose any. Yeah. I was quite, maybe people say I was quite stupid, because I could choose to study in Oxford or Cambridge. One of my classmates went to Oxford to study finance, and he's now become kind of top stock market advisor. Yeah. But I just stick to anthropology, and I find the Asian anthropology something sounding quite unique. And it was again maybe a wrong choice. Later I tried to go to Africa, but without success.
Tried to go to
Africa to study,
yes.
maybe from London, but I couldn't find. My professors told me that it's impossible to find money for the Chinese student to go to Africa. You just go home and study.
But I thought you said you went to study archaeology in London.
No,
originally.
Anthropology. Social anthropology.
From the beginning it was going to be social anthropology.
Right. I chose anthropology.
And which college, where did you go?
SOAS, Department of Anthropology at SOAS.
And what year was this? 1980?
In 1987.
87.
Yeah, in October.
What can you remember any of your feelings at arriving in another civilization and culture?
Yeah, I was really looking forward in the aeroplane to arrive, but after arrival I felt so sleepy. I never left China. The time was so different. And the first room I had was in the Chinese Ministry of Education's office in London. They had a kind of hostel there. I stayed there with other Chinese students and tried to watch TV. I couldn't understand at all because they spoke so quickly. I could fall asleep just in 2 minutes. Yeah, because of also the time difference. And then the next morning, the first evening, I just sit there and just slept in the sitting room. Next morning, I tried to go into the city of London, because the Chinese office is in a suburb. I never took underground before I London. And I discovered the weather in October was so cold compared to my hometown. And the underground tickets of the underground transport was so expensive. It's like to travel from Xiamen to Beijing, And you just travel from suburb to the center of the city. It costed so much.
Yes.
I felt so, so bad about Britain in the beginning. Yeah. The difference of money, the value of money, and you know, difference of language, difference of the weather, yeah, everything.
So you began to get a bit depressed.
Very depressed and homesick. I felt so homesick. I wanted to go home. You know, at least in Quanzhou, my mother and father could give me some money to spend, right? In London, just waiting for the Chinese government to send me money into my account. And I had to still to open certain kind of account in a bank. I had never been to a bank before in China. I just had a cash. Because bank in early reform China was not so popular. And very few, right? Only maybe officials and the parents went. I, as a young man, never thought of going to a bank. And that was so difficult for me. So you have to provide this and that and wait.
Were your fellow Chinese, the people you were with, were they also in the same state as you, miserable?
Some of them, those from Beijing and Shanghai were so excited, unlike me. I'm from this small town, Quanzhou, then was kind of 1/3 the size of today's Quanzhou. And but the Beijing people and Shanghai students, they were there and they were so good at the tube, right?
Yes.
I just follow them. Right? They were very excited and skillful in the city. So yes, there was a big difference. Yeah. They were open-minded. They talked to the British people. I even couldn't speak, even though my English was actually much better than theirs. Right?
How long was it before you went to the university? I mean, to register at the university?
I spent 1 month in an English school whose name I have forgotten, in northern London. Yeah.
For making your English basic?
Just English tuition. Yeah. Together with Portuguese, Spanish, Italians,